She's just the help, William. Why was she in your car? Irene's scream tore through the Coldwell estate like glass shattering on marble. Jasmine didn't speak. Her uniform was ripped, her chest heaving, her bare arm still caught in Irene's clenched fist. Every eye in the courtyard watched as the billionaire's wife dragged the maid from the black SUV like a rag doll, her face red with fury, her voice echoing through the oak-lined drive. But what none of them knew was why William had let her in the car in the first place, and what it cost him. Coldwell Estate stretched across 23 acres of Texas soil, nestled deep in the private lanes of Sherry Lane, Dallas. It was the kind of place you only saw from the outside, unless you were a guest and/or hired help. Jasmine Monroe was neither. She didn't belong in the polished photos that hung in the Coleman family hallway. She wasn't a name printed on linen dinner cards. Her job was simple. Wake before the family, clean the messes, vanish before the guests arrived. Invisible. That's what she had learned to be. She'd been working at Coldwell for almost a year. Long days, quiet nights, tidy hair, pressed uniform, mouth closed. She took care of the kitchen, helped in the nursery, sometimes laid out fresh towels before anyone noticed she'd entered a room. She stayed far away from Mrs. Coleman. Irene Coleman wasn't cruel, not openly. Her cruelty was softer, colder. She never raised her voice, she didn't need to. Her presence did all the cutting. She was the kind of woman who could silence a room just by walking into it, draped in red, diamonds like frost against her collarbone, eyes always scanning, always judging. And then there was him, William Coleman, the man behind Coldwell Estate, CEO of Coleman Tech, one of Forbes's top 20 under 40. Polished suits, quiet voice, unreadable eyes. Jasmine had only spoken to him twice. Once, when she returned his engraved cufflinks, he dropped in the foyer. The second time, he asked her if she liked working at the estate. She nodded and whispered, "Yes, sir," before escaping the room like a shadow. She didn't know why those 2 moments lived rent-free in her chest. Maybe it was because he didn't look at her like she was the help. Not once. But then came the morning that changed everything. It started with a forgotten briefcase. William had left it in the back seat of the black SUV, the one that took him to a board meeting downtown. Jasmine spotted it when she was taking the trash out. She could have told the driver, could have called the housekeeper, but something made her pick it up herself. She knew he had important files inside. She'd seen him packing them the night before. It was urgent. She didn't knock on the front door. She walked across the circular drive, gently holding the briefcase against her chest. She waited by the SUV, 5 minutes, then 10. The sun beat down on her black uniform, sweat trickled down her back. Still she waited. Then she saw him, William, walking briskly toward the car from the front of the estate, and that was the last peaceful moment she remembered, because behind him, in red stilettos and fury painted across her face, came Irene. She didn't ask questions. She didn't pause. She reached for Jasmine's arm and snarled, "What the hell do you think you're doing near my husband's car?" "I was just—" Jasmine started, her voice trembling. "She was just what, William?" Irene's voice rose, trembling with rage. "Returning your briefcase? Or climbing into your back seat like a desperate little—" William stepped forward, voice calm. "Irene, enough." But Irene wasn't finished, not even close. "You bring her into this car? You let her sit where I sit?" she shouted, grabbing Jasmine's sleeve and pulling hard. "She's just the help, William. Why was she in your car?" And that's where the story began. That's the moment everyone would talk about, but no one would know the truth. Not yet. The SUV door slammed shut behind her with a sound that made the birds fly from the trees. Jasmine stumbled backward, her left shoe slipping off the concrete as Irene yanked her harder than she expected. Her elbow scraped the gravel. She didn't cry out, but her body recoiled like it had been burned. "You're lucky I don't call the cops," Irene hissed through clenched teeth. "What did you think this was? Some Cinderella fantasy? That he was going to scoop you up in his Lexus and take you to Neiman Marcus?" Jasmine said nothing. Her throat was closing. Her cheeks burned with the heat of 20 sets of eyes, all from the staff. The gardener froze by the rose hedge. The butler stood on the porch like a ghost, unsure whether to help. Even the driver, still behind the wheel, dared not move. William stood in front of the fountain, one hand gripping his watch strap, the other clenched in a fist at his side. He hadn't said a word. "Answer me!" Irene screamed, shaking Jasmine's arm again. "Tell everyone why you were in that car. I was just bringing—" Jasmine's voice cracked mid-sentence, her chest heaving. "He left his briefcase. I didn't want him to be late." "You see that?" Irene turned to the staff, laughing bitterly. "How thoughtful. Our maid suddenly takes initiative. Next thing you know, she'll be slipping into our bedroom with breakfast in bed." "Irene, that's enough." William's voice was low, final. It sliced through the courtyard like a blade, but Irene was past the point of listening. She turned slowly, locking eyes with her husband. "You defend her now? Is that where we are?" William exhaled sharply. "You're causing a scene." "Oh, I'm causing a scene?" Irene scoffed. "What do you think this looks like, William? To the press? To my mother, who's probably already watching this from her upstairs window with binoculars?" Jasmine's hands trembled. She bent to pick up her shoe, her fingers struggling to loop the strap. Her uniform was smeared with dust. A scrape bled slowly down her elbow. Still, she kept her eyes on the ground. That's where she was safest. But the words burned. The stares cut deeper than any slap. And what shattered her most was his silence. Not once did William look at her. Not once did he say her name. She wasn't even a person in this moment, just a threat in uniform. Across the courtyard, one of the junior maids whispered, "That's why you don't get too close." The wind shifted. Something inside Jasmine, something she'd spent years burying, twitched. It didn't roar, it didn't rage, but it rose, slowly. She stood up fully, fixed her uniform, straightened her back, and for 1 second, she met William's eyes. The moment froze. Even Irene noticed. "What? Now you think you're equal?" she snapped. "You think standing straight makes you anything more than a broom in a dress?" Jasmine looked away again, but this time it wasn't in fear. It was in restraint. William finally moved. He walked toward Jasmine slowly, eyes softening. "I'll handle this," he said quietly. But Irene stepped between them. "No, you won't." She pointed to the house. "Get her out of my courtyard, out of my driveway, off my property. She is done here." William paused. Something shifted behind his eyes. "We'll talk about this inside." But Irene wasn't finished. She turned to Jasmine one last time. "I ever see you near him again, near his car, his office, his shadow, you won't just be fired. You'll be buried in lawsuits so deep you'll wish you were never born." She turned on her heel and stormed into the house, slamming the door so hard the stained glass trembled. The courtyard emptied slowly. The staff scattered like leaves in the wind. William stood frozen for a moment, then followed Irene inside, without looking back. And Jasmine, she just stood there alone, ashamed but not broken, not yet. And here's where we pause just for a moment. If this part hurt to watch, if your heart cracked even a little for Jasmine, then don't just scroll. Subscribe. Because these aren't just stories, these are the voices no one defends. And maybe hitting that button is the only way we show them they're not invisible. Go on. I'll wait. Now back to the story. Jasmine didn't sleep that night. Not because she couldn't, but because she didn't dare close her eyes. The moment she did, Irene's voice echoed in her mind like a fire alarm. "You ever go near him again?" Just the help. Buried in lawsuits. She had only meant to return a briefcase. Now she was the talk of the entire estate. By morning, she had already folded her uniforms into a black plastic bag. She didn't own suitcases. Just that same drawstring trash bag she came with when she first moved into the garden cottage. She didn't cry. Not when she wiped her bloodied elbow with peroxide. Not when she looked at the empty frame where her mother's photo used to sit, shoved inside the side pocket of her bag. And not when she passed the main mansion on her way out, seeing her own reflection in the golden Coldwell gates. Inside, William sat alone in the study, staring at his cold coffee. Irene hadn't spoken to him all morning, which wasn't unusual, but this silence wasn't decorative. It was a verdict. She had dressed in her usual elegance, kissed his cheek out of habit, and left for brunch with her bridge friends. But her eyes, those icy hazel eyes, had said everything. "We are not discussing it." I was right. You were weak. William had spent his entire career building a reputation of control, predictability, professionalism, precision. Emotion didn't belong in his world, but something about the look Jasmine gave him yesterday, it haunted him. Not because she looked hurt, but because she looked disappointed. She had expected him to say something, to stand up, to not let her be ripped apart in front of half the staff, and he had done nothing. Jasmine was nearly at the bus stop by Sherry Lane when she heard footsteps, fast ones. "Jasmine!" It was Elise, one of the newer housekeepers, breathless and red in the face. Jasmine froze. "Elise, I'm leaving. Please, don't make this harder." "You didn't hear?" "Hear what?" "They said, Irene pulled strings with HR this morning. You're not officially terminated, just on personal leave." Jasmine blinked. Why would she do that? She didn't. Elise hesitated. William did. Back inside Coldwell, William stared at his phone, thumb hovering over a message he couldn't bring himself to send. "I'm sorry." It felt so small, so late, so pointless. He locked the screen. If he opened this wound, he knew it would bleed deeper than just reputation. Jasmine boarded the bus anyway. She chose the last row, rolled her suitcase in front of her knees, and stared out the window like it was a different world altogether. Because in truth, she wasn't leaving the estate. She was fleeing the shame, even if she'd done nothing wrong. William stood at the window of the second-floor library, watching the bus fade from the long, winding drive. Something pulled at his chest, something that felt like regret. Not for what had happened, but for what he had allowed. 3 days passed. 3 long, silent days. Jasmine hadn't gone far. She didn't have anywhere to go. She was staying at a rundown motel off Mockingbird Lane, where the walls smelled like cigarettes, and the bathroom light flickered every time she closed the door too hard. She'd applied to a diner nearby. They said they'd call her back. She didn't hold her breath. Her uniform from Coldwell was still folded in her bag. She hadn't touched it. But she also hadn't thrown it away. She kept telling herself it was just work. But it hadn't felt like just work. Not after what happened in that driveway, not after the way William had looked at her, and then looked away. Meanwhile, back at Coldwell, William Coleman was tired of appearances, of silence, of the fragile life he had built on manners, image, and control. He hadn't seen Irene since her flight to New York. She had left without a word, just a note on the dresser that said, "We'll talk when I get back. I need air." That was Irene's way of punishing him. She wouldn't yell. She would disappear. But her absence gave William room to think about the woman he'd failed to defend. He was scheduled for a community outreach event that Saturday. Coldwell Tech had partnered with a food bank on the south side of Dallas, an annual PR thing. Normally, Irene went with him, but she wasn't here, and his assistant was sick. So when the estate manager quietly asked, "Should I call someone to ride with you?" he paused. Jasmine got the call at noon. She almost didn't answer. But when she heard the voice say, "Mr. Coleman asked if you could join him this afternoon," her heart stopped. She thought it was a mistake. She almost said no, but something made her say yes. The SUV pulled up to the motel. She stood outside, in a borrowed blouse and jeans, hair tied up, nervous hands gripping her phone. It wasn't her uniform. It wasn't the Coldwell driveway. It was her, just her. When the door opened, William was sitting on the passenger side. He stepped out first, held the door for her without speaking. She slid in, careful not to touch anything. The silence inside the SUV was heavy, but not hostile, just full. 20 minutes into the ride, he spoke. "You didn't have to come." She looked straight ahead. "I didn't think I should." He nodded slowly. "I just didn't want to do this alone." She turned slightly. "Don't you have people for that?" A breath of a laugh escaped him. "That's the thing. I have people, but no one sees me." She didn't answer, but she understood. They rode past Highland Park in silence until he finally asked, "Where have you been staying?" "Just a place off Mockingbird," she replied softly. "Is it safe?" She shrugged. "It's temporary." He was quiet again. Then, "You didn't deserve what happened that day." Jasmine turned to him fully for the first time. His eyes were locked on the road ahead. He wasn't performing, he meant it. But she didn't let herself soften. "I'm not your problem, Mr. Coleman." He flinched at that. "I never said you were." The SUV pulled into the food bank parking lot. A line of volunteers waited near folding tables, crates of canned goods stacked high. He got out first. She followed. But before they walked toward the crowd, he turned to her one more time. "Jasmine." Her name on his lips made her heart ache. "You don't have to be invisible." And then he walked. Just like that. Leaving her standing in the sunlight, in borrowed clothes, feeling something she hadn't felt in a long, long time. Seen. They didn't speak much during the volunteer shift. They didn't need to. Something about packing food next to each other, shoulder to shoulder, gave them a rhythm, like an unspoken apology dancing between cans of green beans and boxed pasta. Jasmine worked quietly, moving with practiced grace. William noticed how she smiled at the children, how she knelt down when handing food to elderly guests, how she This wasn't the woman Irene had screamed about. This was someone else entirely. After 3 hours, the heat began to wane. The event wrapped up. The tables were cleared. William offered to drive her back to the motel. She hesitated, then nodded. The ride was quieter this time, but less tense. She rolled down the window slightly, letting the breeze lift the hair from her forehead. He glanced at her, then looked away, almost guilty. "You're not like what she said," he muttered, fingers resting loosely on the steering wheel. Jasmine didn't reply. Then, softly, she said, "People like your wife don't really see people like me, not unless we're late with a tray or standing in the wrong hallway." He looked over. "I saw you." "No," she whispered. "You watched me." "That's different." The motel wasn't far now, but William suddenly turned, down a side street, shaded by oaks. It was a quiet stretch. He pulled over near a small park. "I can't take you back there yet," he said. "Not until I say this." She sat still, unsure if she should get out or brace herself. "I failed you, Jasmine. I should have spoken up." She exhaled. "It's done. You don't owe me anything." He looked at her then, really looked. "What happened to you before Coldwell?" She hesitated. And then the silence broke. "I was supposed to be a nurse," she said, her voice hollow. "I was 1 semester away. Then my mum got sick. Stage 4. Liver failure." His face shifted, softened. "She was the only parent I had. I dropped out. Took every job I could. Hospitals, diners, cleaning services. When she passed, I had nothing but debt and a resume full of service work." William said nothing, just listened. "I remember the day I was hired at Coldwell," she continued. "I stood outside the gate for 10 minutes before buzzing in. I kept asking myself if it was a mistake, if I was walking into a world that would swallow me whole." Tears welled up, but she didn't let them fall. "I learned to be invisible because it was the only way to survive in a house like that." William's voice cracked slightly. "That shouldn't be survival. That should be sanctuary." She smiled weakly. "It never was." He rested his hand on the console between them, but didn't touch her. "Irene doesn't know you," he said. "Not like this." "She doesn't need to," Jasmine replied. "I wasn't meant to be known in that house. I was meant to dust the shelves and disappear." "But I see you now," he whispered. She turned her head, finally meeting his eyes. "And what good does seeing me do?" she asked. "When it's already too late?" They sat in silence. The street lamp flickered on above them. Somewhere a child laughed in the distance. A car door slammed. The world kept moving. But inside that SUV, something had changed. You know, most people never hear stories like Jasmine's. They clean hotel rooms, stock grocery shelves. They ride buses next to you, live in silence, love in secret, and carry pain no one asks about. If this part made you pause, if you felt anything at all, then don't just keep watching. Subscribe, because these are the stories no one tells. And maybe we should start listening. Go ahead. I'll wait right here. Now let's keep going. The following morning, Jasmine stood outside the motel room, her hoodie pulled tight around her shoulders. She clutched a to-go coffee in both hands, watching the sun rise over Sherry Lane. The sky was painted in soft oranges, the kind that made the world feel gentler than it actually was. Her phone buzzed. A text. Unknown number. Are you free this morning? I need help at the library wing. She didn't need to ask who it was from. An hour later, Jasmine walked through the back gate of Coldwell Estate for the first time since the incident. No red dresses, no slammed car doors, no eyes watching her, just silence and birdsong. William met her at the side entrance. No security, no assistant.
He handed her a key
just
card.
him.
Temporary access. Irene's still in New York. She took it, surprised. I figured, he added, you'd feel safer with the front door locked behind you. The library wing of the estate was massive. 2 stories of dark walnut shelves, velvet armchairs, and antique lamps glowing like soft firelight. They spent the morning organizing old files and restoring digital archives. No one said much, but the silence wasn't sharp anymore. It was shared. At noon, he offered lunch. She declined. He offered again, this time just a sandwich and sparkling water in the courtyard near the fountain. She agreed. The wind danced gently through the ivy-covered trellis above them. Jasmine sat across from William at a small iron table, her fingers nervously tapping the edge of her glass. Do you remember, he said mid-bite, that night 2 months ago, during the thunderstorm? You brought in tea. I was in the library. She blinked slowly. You looked like you wanted to say something but didn't. She smiled faintly. I always looked like that around you. Why? Because I knew your world wasn't mine. He leaned back in his chair, the weight of her honesty settling between them. My world, he said carefully, is emptier than people think. Empty with how many rooms? Exactly. They both chuckled, softly, unsure if they should. It felt dangerous, but real. A few minutes passed. Then she asked, were you ever in love with her? He didn't answer at first. He picked at a slice of tomato from his plate. Irene and I, he said finally, were arranged to be powerful, not happy. Jasmine swallowed. I tried to love her, I really did. But I think she's only ever loved control, and I became another trophy on her shelf. Silence again, but this time it didn't hurt. It held them. As they walked back through the garden path, he paused. Can I show you something? She hesitated. Is it another wing of the house? He shook his head, smiling. He led her past the rose bushes, around the back. There, tucked behind a stone wall, was a greenhouse she'd never seen before. Inside, glass shimmered, and warm light poured across rows of herbs, succulents, and one large potted orange tree in the center. He opened the door, letting her step in first. I come here when I can't think. She inhaled deeply. The air smelled like citrus and soil. This place doesn't feel like the rest of the estate, she murmured. It's the only part of it I made myself. They stood in silence. She touched the leaf of a basil plant. He watched her, not in a way that weighed her down, but in a way that held her steady. It was the first time she didn't feel like help. She felt human. This is the lowest emotional point in the entire story. Here we show the fragility of trust, the pain of assumptions, and how everything they were building comes crashing down. There's no violence, but this break should hurt more than any slap. Let's break their world, carefully. The next morning, the estate buzzed. Coldwell Tech was hosting a private investors' brunch in the garden. Caterers moved like ants across marble floors, laying out glassware. House staff had been called in early. Fresh orchids were flown in from
Jasmine
Miami.
had come through the back as instructed. She wasn't staff anymore, but she wasn't exactly a guest either. She helped William organize files for his 11 a.m. presentation. No one knew, no one noticed, except one person. At exactly 10:47 a.m., Irene Coleman returned. She wasn't due for 2 more days. But Irene never announced her moves. She made entrances, and today she made one that stopped the party cold. She stepped through the side gate in a navy blue fitted dress, sunglasses low on her nose, diamond earrings flashing like warnings. She didn't speak to the guests. She didn't wave to the investors. She walked straight to the library, heels echoing like war drums on hardwood. Jasmine didn't hear her coming, not until it was too late. William had just stepped out to take a call. Jasmine was standing by the printer restocking paper. That's when the door swung open. Irene stood in the frame, still as stone. The silence screamed. Jasmine swallowed. "Mrs. Coleman." Irene shut the door behind her. So gently. Too gently. "You just don't know when to leave, do you?" Jasmine's hands tightened on the stack of paper. "I was just helping Mr. Coleman with—" "Stop," Irene said sharply. She stepped closer slowly. "I knew it the moment I saw you. You were quiet, too quiet. Girls like you learn to smile at men like him. You wait, you play innocent, and then you slide into their lives like shadows. I trusted you in my house. You never trusted me. You made sure of that." Irene's nostrils flared. "So it's true." Jasmine stepped back. Nothing happened. "But something almost did," Irene whispered. The door opened again. William stepped in, saw the two of them. The tension, the red in Irene's face. His voice low. "What's going on?" "She was in your greenhouse," Irene said. "Wasn't she?" William didn't answer. Jasmine stepped forward. "It was my fault. I shouldn't have—" "No," Irene snapped. "You shouldn't have existed in our space. That's the problem." William's jaw clenched. "That's enough." Irene turned to him, eyes wide with disbelief. "You're defending her. Again." He didn't say anything, but the silence said everything. Jasmine saw it in his face. He wasn't ready to choose. Not really. Not out loud. And that's when something inside her cracked. She nodded slowly. "I get it now," she said, voice trembling. "This place, it was never going to be mine, not even for a second." She looked at William. "I let you make me believe I mattered." "Jasmine." She stepped back. "And no, it's okay, I'm done." And she walked out. This time not to be stopped, not to be dragged, but to protect what was left of her heart. William stood still. Irene exhaled slowly. "Now," she whispered. "Maybe we can begin again." But William wasn't looking at her. His eyes were on the door Jasmine had just closed, and for the first time in a long time, he felt like a coward. The Coldwell fountain had never been this quiet. Not even the water dared speak. Jasmine sat on the bench near the garden path, her knees drawn in, hands wrapped around her phone. Not because she was waiting for a message, but because she wasn't. She knew he wouldn't text. She knew he wouldn't call. Because men like William didn't chase women like her, and even if he wanted to, he was still afraid to choose. Back in the master bedroom, William sat in the dark, lights off, tie loosened, laptop glowing on the bed but untouched. Irene had gone to the guest wing. She hadn't said a word since the library. No gloating, no anger, just cold. That scared him more than her rage. But what haunted him more was Jasmine's voice. "I let you make me believe I mattered." Those words looped in his head like punishment, because deep down she did matter, more than he was brave enough to admit. He opened his laptop, typed a message, deleted it, opened a new one, typed again, stopped. What was he even doing? She deserved peace. She didn't need more confusion. He closed the laptop, rubbed his hands down his face, then stood. At the same time, across town, Jasmine sat in her cousin's tiny one-bedroom apartment, her temporary safe haven. The sounds of traffic bled through the thin walls. She stared at her own reflection in the microwave door, and for the first time she asked herself, was I waiting for him to save me?
She hated that answer. She'd always been her own hero, but something about him, his gentleness, his silences, his failure, had cracked her. She didn't know if she wanted him, or if she just wanted to be chosen for once. Later that night, as thunder rolled in the distance, William stepped into the greenhouse alone. He stood under the orange tree, rain tapping against the glass. He didn't know how long he stayed there. Minutes, hours. He remembered the way she had smiled when she smelled the basil, the way her voice softened when she said, "This place doesn't feel like the rest of the estate." She wasn't just some maid. She had brought life into his world, and he let it die. Unless he made the choice he should have made days ago. He grabbed his coat and drove. Jasmine heard the knock around 10:13 p.m. Soft, hesitant, she froze, halfway through folding laundry on her cousin's futon. Another knock. She approached the door slowly, opened it. There he was, rain on his shoulders, wrinkled shirt, eyes that hadn't slept. She didn't speak, neither did he, not at first. Then he said the only thing she'd been waiting to hear since this all began. "I should have fought for you." Her throat tightened. He took a step closer. "I let fear make me quiet, but I don't want quiet anymore." She blinked fast, trying to hold it together. "I don't know what you want, William. I want you to stop thinking you were ever just the help." Silence. Then, "I don't need a savior." "I know. I'm not here to save you. I'm here to stop losing you." The rain started again, but neither of them moved. She looked at him, soaking wet, heart in his eyes, and made her choice. She stepped aside. Let him in. The next morning, for the first time in over a year, Jasmine didn't wake up with dread in her chest. She stood by the small kitchen window, coffee in hand, watching the early traffic slide past, like a stream of silver and red. Inside, William sat on the couch, coat folded beside him, the quiet hum of her cousin's broken ceiling fan spinning above. Neither of them had said much after he came in the night before. No dramatic kisses, no confessions. Just presence, just breath, just, finally, truth. "I don't know what comes next," Jasmine said softly, turning toward him. William looked up, calm but sure. "We don't need to know. We just need to not go back." She set her mug down. "I don't want to be a secret. You won't be. I don't want pity. You deserve respect. And I don't want to be something you hide from the world until it's convenient." He stood, walked toward her, stopped a breath away. "You won't be invisible anymore," he said. "Not to me, not to anyone." 3 days later, the headline hit. William Coleman announces departure from Coldwell Tech. Sources confirm personal rebuilding year. It was everywhere. Twitter, Reddit, cable news, business podcasts. Everyone speculated. But no one knew the full story. Only Jasmine did. William had stepped down. Not because he lost control, but because he wanted it back. He sold his shares, kept the estate but only part of it. The other half donated to a women's transitional housing project in Dallas. And the greenhouse turned into a full therapy garden program run by Jasmine. 1 month later, Jasmine walked the Coldwell grounds again, but not in a uniform. In jeans, sneakers, and a clipboard in her hand. She passed a new maid on her first day and smiled at her gently. "You don't have to keep your head down here," she said. The girl blinked, nodded, whispered, "Thank you." William met Jasmine at the greenhouse entrance that afternoon. No bodyguards, no headlines, no pressure. Just 2 people, on soil they'd both bled into. He handed her a set of new keys. "What are these?" "I had a second door installed. This place, it's yours as much as mine now." She stared at him. "I'm not asking you to be anything you're not," he said. "I just want to keep choosing you." She stepped forward, laid her forehead gently against his chest. And in that moment, she wasn't the help. She wasn't poor. She wasn't a mistake. She was loved. Out loud. Across the screen of this story, maybe some are clapping, some smiling, some wiping their eyes. But if you're still here, if you stayed to see Jasmine finally be seen,
then maybe you're one of the few who understands why stories like this matter. So many people live in the background, working quietly, hurting silently, loving privately. But love doesn't need wealth or status. It needs courage. And if this story moved you even a little, don't just walk away, subscribe. Because stories like Jasmine's deserve to be heard, and shared, and remembered.